All right, well, the first thing you should do when you do a puzzle is count material. Black has 2 pieces for a rook, but white has 3 extra pawns. So theoretically, white is ahead in material, but it's black's move. And as always, we want to look at our checks, captures, and threats. All right, well, how many checks does black have? He has queen takes f3 check, queen to g2 check, bishop to g2 check, knight to g3 check. Now, all those checks, and queen takes g1 check, of course. So all those checks are guarded, but that doesn't mean they're bad. You have to work them out and see what happens. So let's take one at random. All right, so let's assume for the sake of argument we don't want to give up our queen, but we're willing to give up a piece to see what else can happen. So let's look at a move like knight g3 check. Now the problem with knight g3 check is that white has 2 different ways to take, which means we're going to have to beat both of those in order to win. And white has to take because that's his only legal move. So knight g3 check, for the sake of argument, let's say white plays h takes g3 and leaves the rook protecting the back rank. Well, then bishop g2 check is just met by rook takes g2, and queen takes f3 check is met by queen takes f3, and there aren't any great quiet moves there. So knight g3 check seems to be refuted by h takes g3, and if it's refuted by h takes g3, then we don't have to look at rook takes g3, because white only needs one way to refute black's move for it not to be good. All right, so let's try the second non-queen sack, which is bishop g2 check. That looks like it's going to meet the same fate, but you always have to check it out. So bishop g2 check. Now the good news is white only has one way to play that, which is rook takes g2, so that's good. That's more forcing. And after rook takes g2, black has one more safe check. He could check queen f1 check. He could also play like knight g3, but let's look at queen f1 because it's safe. And then the rook would go back to g1. And now we could look at knight g3 check. Now he can't take with the rook because it's pinned to the king. So he'd have to play h takes g3, and voila, there's a mate in 1, queen h3 with a mate. All right, so let's go through that line again. Double check it. Bishop g2 check, rook takes g2, queen f1 check, rook g1, knight g3 check, h takes g3, queen h3 checkmate. I think this is a checkmate that most good players would find in a game without much trouble. Yet weaker players have problems in games because they don't know that there's an answer there, and they make quiescence errors and they stop. For instance, they say things like, well, I can't play bishop g2 check because he just takes with the rook and I lose a bishop. They don't look further and say, well, you know, do I get anything out of that? And even if they see bishop g2 check, rook takes g2, and they then go to queen f1 check, then after rook g1 they stop and they go, well, I don't have any more safe checks, overlooking the fact that, well, you know, you still have checks of consequence, so you have to keep going. And you look at knight g3 check. Now, if it doesn't work, then you're not going to play it. But, you know, if it does work, then you are going to play the line. So you have to keep going. So bishop g2 check, rook takes g2, queen f1 check, rook g1. If this is a game, you'd look at knight g3 check and say, what does that do? Well, it forces him to take with the pawn. Does that do anything for me? Sure. It lets me mate him on h3. So if we move the pieces, it'll look like this. Bishop check, rook takes, queen checks, rook in the way, knight checks. The fact that he's forking the queen is kind of irrelevant. There's only one legal move, and there's our checkmate with the queen. So, you know, I'm pretty sure I would find this in a game. And I would be desperate enough to also, because I would realize that if I'm trying to stop white's pawns from coming down and getting a queen, it's very unlikely I'm going to be able to do that because white has just too much material. So I'm going to be kind of desperate here and looking for all kinds of mating attacks. And, you know, I'm going to look for all those checks, captures, and threats and see if they do something. And I won't make quiescence errors. So assuming I had enough time, I would be very surprised if I didn't find this in a slow game.